Are you ready to reawaken the divine power within you, as well as your ancestors? Are you ready to connect with your consciousness and tap into the ancestral spiritual roots? And then use daily practices to remember who you truly are, the creator of your reality. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD and ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, the study of spirituality. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, both available on Amazon and Audible. When we talk about spirituality, rarely do we really look at it from the standpoint of ancestral roots history, the ancestral roots of the Black experience, being Black and what that feels like, what that looks like, the essence of that, the experience of that, and how it pertains to your spiritual journey. Now, when we talk about spirituality, yes, we do talk about it from a infinite paradigm of not identifying with things like race, with things like gender. But it's very important to understand that though being infinite beings means that we don't identify with the race we so happen to be brought into, we still acknowledge that the experience of being Black is significant in this world. So it is not wise to neglect the experience we are having in this physical world just simply because we want to only focus on the metaphysical. You see, both things go hand in hand. I always talk about the importance of recognizing contrasts, recognizing both sides of the spectrum. So if you are going to go down the path of really learning about the metaphysical, the spiritual, you must also recognize the physical. You must also recognize the material. And so when we go on this journey, it's very important to identify that your journey is going to be from the perspective of the experiences you are having. You are here to have a particular experience, and you have chosen to come to this realm to experience the life that you're experiencing, to be the person whom you are right now, in order to have that particular experience. So you essentially did choose to come to this realm as you are, as a person of color, as a person of, feminine gender or male gender, as a person of, a particular heritage, culture, or upbringing. And the reason is because you are to really learn the essence of who you truly are by way of that particular, or I should say, your particular experience. So you have to recognize that being a person of color, being Black, very significant, is very important in the unraveling, the unfoldment of your consciousness and recognizing who you are. But it's also important to recognize that throughout the spiritual journey, you shouldn't necessarily identify with that. And we see it often in the Black community, people who are, conscious, they're on the spiritual path, but they are so identified with being Black that everything that comes with being Black is usually carried with a sense of negativity, is carried with a sense of, aggression, militancy, right? Rather than recognizing that this experience is one that, yes, is only built for a particular kind of individual. It is only an experience that strong individuals can actually have and live through, you see, and you recognize and you humbly acknowledge that in order for you to go through this experience, you have to essentially be at a place where you see yourself as somebody who isn't weak, somebody that can overcome so many things. Because as we can see by way of history, when you look at the history of Black people, people who descended from Africa, you can see that there is a lineage, there is a legacy of consistently overcoming struggles, oppression, and still, right, coming through it with joy, with happiness, with the ability to express oneself and be loving and be welcoming, you see? But it's important to not identify with a particular Black experience, particularly African American experience, particularly any Black experience dealing with living in a European country or Western civilization, but really understanding that, you know, the experiences that you have are not who you are, but something that allows you to recognize and see who you are by way of the experience. You see, the experience itself is not you. The experience is going to help reveal to you who you truly are. And so with spirituality, in tangent with the Black experience, you are then given a multitude of, chances and opportunities to really dive deep into the essence of who you are, because all of these, characteristics, all of these attributes are in fact things that people can take and feel maybe victimized by it. And I'm talking about spirituality because for some people, spirituality in itself can be daunting. It can be heavy, right? It can be something that they just don't want to deal with, because spirituality means accountability. It means taking ownership of your life. And some people are not ready to take on that understanding, that realization. The Black experience, people are just not able to deal with that experience and really understand the significance of what that experience means and what it looks like and how to get through it. Even though you can easily, see the difference between a spiritual person or the spiritual path, because one can make that decision consciously or not. But the Black experience, you really can't decide to not be Black, right? It is what it is. Now, you have people who try to, bleach their skin and whiten their skin and things of that nature, but it really, it doesn't change anything, right? So you have to understand that there are layers and layers and layers of this existence on this earth. And then when you throw in the aspects of gender, it's a little bit easier for men than it is for women. Okay. And we are in a point in time where those differences are starting to get blurry. Some would argue it's harder to be a man than a woman. I personally disagree with that. I think still you can obviously see where women deal with more difficulties than men, right? So when you look at all of those different things, what you are really witnessing is a different level of existence, experience, which also signifies the different levels of strength that people inherently have within them. You see, the more things that you can look at and say, okay, this right here is for lack of a better word, a ranking, a system, or a way of looking at struggle, right? Because people can argue our very existence on this earth is a sign or a symbol of struggle, right? Even the Buddha says we are here to suffer. And so life in itself can be looked at as struggle, as pain, as suffering. Now, when you get to a certain level, you recognize what that really means. But ultimately, just existing here can be seen as suffering, can be seen as pain, can be seen as a terrible, bad experience, right? Then you add in, okay, now you are here and you are Black. Then you can add in, you are here, you are Black, and then you are female. You can go down the list and you can continue to add things onto you. Now, what does that really mean? What that really means is you are strong, you are capable. And when you chose to come down here and have that experience, that means that you recognized your own power and strength, and you wanted to face a challenge of forgetting that power and strength and coming into a new realization of it in this physical form, in this present existence. So, what I want you to understand is your legacy here, being a person of color, has a multitude of levels, right? Being of African descent, really recognizing the power of the struggle, but more so, not struggle, more so the experience, the shared experience that we have and our ancestors, right, has also experienced to maybe harsher degrees, deeper and more intense degrees, can actually use to really help you to recognize how powerful you are, how those ancestors can actually and do actually support you on your journey, because you recognize that that lineage carries itself within you. It exists within you. Okay. It carries with it a sacred knowledge that is passed down within our DNA, right? Within our color, within our melanin, within our existence, right? So I don't want you to think in terms of this experience of life being one of survival, this experience of being Black being one of survival, this experience of perhaps being a woman being one of survival, but recognizing that with all of those things, particularly the Black experience, you are carrying sacred knowledge that is passed down through the generations, but also you are acknowledging and being able to see that you chose this experience because of how powerful you truly are, and knowing that before you came here to choose that and experience that life, right? This life. So it's important to understand that Black spiritual traditions, especially, right, kept us spiritually alive during moments of challenge, moments of oppression, moments of, challenge, obstacles, struggles. Now, as we go through this life, and as you can see throughout history, there's been things that has been done to people of color. Now, this is not a victim conversation. This is a conversation as to recognizing simply how powerful we are, because when you look at history and what has been done to us and where we have transcended, right, that situation, that toxic drama, right, as we have transcended that and we have ascended so fast in a short amount of time, displays our ability to get through anything. It displays our ability as a community, as a group, as a race of people, but also as individuals, your ability to get through anything. So you can look at simply your lineage, your ancestors, as evidence that there is nothing you can't get through. If they got through it, you most certainly can get through it. So you can look at that example generationally, but then you can also look at yourself individually and see that you have also gotten through things within your life. And therefore, that is evidence you will get through any other struggle. Now, this is about really reframing the conversation about history, reframing the conversation about being Black, reframing the conversation about what is struggle, okay? Because you're not just part of the struggle, right? Really, there is no struggle. Now, what I mean by that is recognizing that you are part of a spiritual lineage of creators and conscious beings whom choose to step into a space where challenge was a part of the experience. And to do so means that you recognize you are above that challenge. You see, there is no challenge that you are faced with that you cannot overcome. But you have to have the understanding of that truth. And it is through looking at our, you know, heritage, our ancestral lineage, that we can identify that, but then also we can see it within our own lives when we look deep enough. So when it comes to ancestral wisdom, you recognize that the ancestors are constantly speaking to you. They're speaking to you in terms of your spiritual awakening. When you look at even people who are not necessarily spiritual, but more religious, because as far as I'm concerned, there is a difference. Now, yes, you can be religious as well as spiritual, but many people whom are spiritual are not necessarily religious, and many people who are religious are not necessarily spiritual. Most times, religious people, they follow a doctrine. They follow rules. They follow a regimen that is strict. They're told what to do. To me, the spiritual path is an individual path where you follow your own intuition, your feelings, your gut. Okay? That is a very courageous way to exist and be, but it reaps the most reward because you are coming and living your own life, your own way from a point of view of authenticity. Okay. So when you think about even those who are religious and you look at religion, particularly Christianity, you can see a stark difference between a church who is Black versus a church who is white. Okay. You can see culturally there is vast amount of differences, and particularly in expression, particularly in music, particularly in communication. Why is that? Because our ancestors, okay, the spiritual knowledge and wisdom of our ancestors continue to transcend the trauma, transcend any oppression, transcend any, toxicity, negativity, and was continuing to pass down ultimately the aspects of spirituality that are pure, that can, in fact, be instilled, implemented into something like Christianity, but still have the essence of, African spirituality or spirituality in general. You see, this is why when you go to church, people are dancing, people are, speaking loudly, people are singing beautifully, because that expression, that experience was passed down right throughout our genes and was able to be, given, was able to be absorbed, was able to be, passed down in a way that you recognize who you are ultimately, that it doesn't matter the situation. It doesn't matter the circumstance. It doesn't matter what somebody tells you to do, right? AKA AKA religion, Christianity. You still will have implemented and you still will make it yours. Okay. You still will see that the ancestors, this shared experience that we have, has a spiritual wisdom that comes with it that cannot be, it cannot be tampered with. It cannot really be corrupted, right? It can only influence the corruption, right? Many people look at religion as a form of corruption. They look at Christianity as a form of control, you see? And so the fact that our African ancestors have really put a positive spin or influence religion, Christianity from a positive sense, meaning that you have expression, you have joy, okay, implemented in it, that shows you just how powerful we are. And so what I want you to understand is that your ancestors, they are not in the past. Your ancestors are within you. So it doesn't matter what you do. That blackness that is within you is going to express itself, is going to show itself. It is going to influence that which you are doing, who you are being is a part of that ancestral wisdom. It just can't be avoided, you know? So you want to understand how consciously you communicate the intention, the things like silence, the inner alignment, all those things are part of what makes you you, but also recognizing that when you communicate, when you experience the world and you essentially communicate with that experience, right? You recognize, okay, this is what life is. Okay. You are somebody who is spiritually conscious. You are somebody who is of African descent. You are a person of color. You are Black. You are male or female. Those have different experiences. When you recognize what that and how that shows up, right, in this physical realm, and you are able to identify it and see it, you understand that there's a communication that has to happen. So depending on how you see it and depending on how you respond to it will dictate how aligned you are. You see, so you have some people who, like I said before, are very militant in their way and they are angry. Okay. And rightfully so. But you have to ask yourself, do you want to be angry? Do you think that being angry is a win for you? That's the question I often ask. You can be at a place where you recognize the harm that has been done to you, continuously is done to you, and has been done to your ancestors. You can identify a villain, right? But you have to ask yourself, me being angry at that particular person or group of people, me being constantly in a space where I'm ready to fight, does that actually serve me? Or does it actually take away my peace and is more of a psychological way of the quote unquote oppressor or the enemy actually winning in a whole nother level, in a whole nother way? You see, joy is in fact the biggest and most powerful weapon you can have against anybody you perceive as a villain, as the, oppression, the oppressor, right? Or the person who is trying to get you, right? The they. So you have to be mindful and intentional about how you're going to live your life. You can always acknowledge when people are trying to harm you to a certain degree. That's fine. But how you live your life, though, needs to be in alignment with who you know yourself to be and the life you want to live. So how you respond to these things going on is important. Remember, your communication with those things looks like really being responsible about responding to those things. Responding in a way that you want to respond, not in a way you feel like you have to respond, because if you do that, they are in control of you. They, this idea of they, is a thing that is influencing you to actually not be who your ancestors actually want you to be. Not be who you are spiritually, right? Must be. Not who you, on a divine level, the divinity in you really wants you to be, your consciousness wants you to be. So, though the process of getting into that level of, recognizing what's been done to us and seeing the injustice and wanting to be an advocate and wanting to hold that space of anger or disappointment or even hurt, those are natural phases and those are okay to experience and feel. But you must always come to this question: how do I want to feel? What actually serves me? And when you ask those questions, then that leads you to the path of really understanding the true essence of power, the true essence of Black spiritual power, the true essence of spiritual power, okay? The true essence of spirituality. So, in order to do that, there's a lot of practices you can take on. Altars are a great one. I have me a small altar in the corner of my bedroom right next to my bed. It has a few crystals, some incense, a mat where I can just simply sit there and just be, right? And you can have an altar with images of your favorite ancestors or your mentors who may not be here anymore on this realm, but have yourself a space where you can basically bring yourself to stillness and mindfulness. Prayer is a powerful one. Prayer, again, is something that is identified as a Christian, you know, religious practice, even though all religions they pray. But particularly for us, the African American community, Black community, Christianity is more, popular and more of a significant, you know, way of connecting with the divine. Even though they connect with the divine separate from them, we're talking about connecting within, connecting with our ancestors, okay, who are within you as well. And so prayer is another example of communicating, right? Being in connection with the truth and the core of who you are and sifting through the, ideas of labels and experiences and, how the world may perceive you or how you may perceive the world, and recognizing the truth as to who you are, which is consciousness. But prayer is a practice of helping you to connect with that. I'm not talking about the prayer of asking for something. I'm just simply talking about the prayer of simply being grateful for what you already have, you see? And so when you do that, then you allow you to really connect deeper with yourself and connect deeper with the multitude and infinite layers of who you are, particularly our ancestors, because the great thing about the ancestors is because they are ancestors means that they have transcended this physical world. And though they have been through so many hard travesties and struggles and issues while being here in this physical world, the fact is they are no longer in this physical world. So they have transcended to a whole nother space. And they can then look back and see the benefits, the beauty, the power of going through what they have gone through. And they can essentially give you that calm, that peace, that true divine understanding when you pray in a certain way and you learn to connect with them, right? They let you know that, hey, this is okay. That yes, it is disheartening. It is sad. It is frustrating. It creates anger at times, but ultimately the grand scheme of it all, okay, it really is a process that you have chosen to go through in order for you to awaken to who you truly are. All right. It's important to recognize that, things like storytelling is good, maybe even getting into writing stories, journaling, those are things that are good to help activate the guidance, from your lineage, from the ancestors. So you start to really like practice things that allow you to tap into a creative, reservoir that is within you, because that's one thing about Black people. We are creative. We are probably the most creative people on the planet, so, and I think that is a result of our deep connection with spirituality and also connecting the concept of suffering, struggle, and what that brings on and what that awakens within us. Because you have to tap into that power in order for you to get through the struggle, you see? And then as we look again at our lineage, then we can see and bear witness more to how powerful we are. And so that gives more context to the confidence, the power, the beauty, the strength that is us, you see? So what I want to give you some daily, things that you can do daily to master this spiritual understanding, right? To bring your power into today, real practices, meditation, very important. These are not things that are just made up recently. These are things that have already always existed since the beginning of our existence in this physical realm, and possibly arguably beyond that. Breath work. Breath is life. It isn't just something that sustains and gives you oxygen. It is actually a vital force right? It is actually wisdom, power, knowledge. I mentioned before, journaling, very important. Sound. Sound is a beautiful thing. This is why music is so prevalent in the Black community, is because we understand through our lineage that sound is very important to awakening. Sound is frequency. Sound is vibration. When we understand the significance of sound, then we have a deeper appreciation for music, for even speech. This is why we created hip hop. Speech is not just simply people putting words together that rhyme. Speech is the first physical manifestation of your thoughts. When you speak, it is sending out a vibration out into the universe. Okay, that vibration is a frequency. So you have to understand that the importance of sound is very significant. What you play, the music you play is very significant. The words you speak is extremely powerful, so you have to understand that. Sound bowls is very important. That's something a lot of us are getting into now. So, get some sound bowls, tuning forks, things of that nature to help kind of calm you and get you to a place where you can actually be receptive to the ancestors and recognizing your own power. Aligning with nature. Now, when I think about aligning with nature, what I'm thinking is, when we go out into nature, what happens when we pass away? What happens when we transcend, right? Our body stays here. It is buried. It is anchored into the ground. Now, for me, that says that there's an energy that is still anchored in the ground, right? So when I think of nature, I think of connecting with that energy, connecting with the ancestral spirits, the, vibrations of the trees, the grass, even the rocks, that have essentially, in one way, one shape or form, has been here since the very beginning and has witnessed all of that. Can you imagine that, our ancestors and even ourselves, maybe 100 years tops, right, that we exist in this plane, but nature continues to recycle and exist almost infinitely throughout the time and the existence of the planet. So nature has witnessed all of it. And as the witness of all of it, when you connect with nature, you essentially connect with that divine peace, that calmness, that understanding, the divine understanding. It's like when people pass away and they're right there and they're about to transition, it seems like there's a divine understanding as to life and acceptance of all things and peace, And so when you're in nature, the objective there, and you can ask anybody who loves nature, they go there and that's exactly what you experience is peace and tranquility. It becomes a mirror to your inner world. And the truth is your inner world is one of peace. The very core of who you are is one of peace. So nature will actually allow you to, increase the intensity of that inner peace. Now, another thing you can do using herbs that's very prevalent in our culture, whether it is some people smoke herbs, not my thing. I've tried an edible once. I did it once. I've gotten what exactly I needed from that experience. And I don't need to do it again, but some people will continue that experience, right? Water is actually a good tool, to really actually measure where you are. When we get into things like the messages hidden in water, you really understand that water holds energy. It holds intention. Your body is mostly water. So when you speak, when you think, you are changing the molecular structure of those cells, right? Of those water molecules, right? And so you have to be intentional about the significance and the power of water. Water really holds memory. Water is something that can be programmed. So you really have to be responsible about, you know, how you speak, what you think, and exactly how you're dealing with the water within you and outside of you, because there's water all outside of us, right? Even when there's quote unquote no water, there's water molecules all around us. Okay. Incense, sage, those are great things, great practices passed down from our ancestors. They shift your energy, your mindset, and they increase your manifestation power. So those are the things that I would recommend that you do as homage to our ancestors when it comes to your spirituality and allowing you to really tap into that ancestral power. Recognize, though, that you're not alone in this. I'm sure you experience as a person of color when you go someplace, say someplace predominantly white, and you see another black person and you make eye contact. There's this thing that happens. You don't have to say a word. You may, shake your head, nod your head at them. You may say a word. You may say, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing?" And you may even feel a sense of connection, like your family, because you are. Not in terms of just blood and DNA, but also in terms of experience and having a deep bond or connection. Just like in the military, the reason why they call them brothers amongst each other is because they have gone through the struggles of the initiation of military training, perhaps even war together. Now, you can compare the Black experience as the same thing. There are initiations that we go through. There are common experiences that we go through. There is a, sense of war that exists in from this experience. So you have to acknowledge that you are not alone, right? But you also have to acknowledge that community is essentially consciousness. Like, we're talking about collective consciousness, but we're also talking about grand consciousness and really recognizing the oneness. So amongst our own, there is more opportunity to recognize the oneness of all things because we have a similar experience. You see, so it lends itself to the opportunity of a deeper spiritual connection that goes beyond just race by identifying race. You get to see that, okay, yes, you and I are one in terms of our experiences. There's a connection there. When you go deeper, you see another individual who may happen to not be Black, and still you can practice having that connection with them as well. You see? Now, the thing is, there are so many levels to our experiences, to our interactions, to our lives. And so you have to learn how to maneuver through those things and recognize the differences in the degrees of experiences that you're going to have. That makes life more fun, more interesting to me as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to have a different connection and experience with somebody who is Black like me. I'm going to have a different connection and experience with a Black woman and a Black man. I'm going to have a different level of experience with a white man, a white woman, an Asian man, an Asian woman, right? That is because our experiences of this life are different, and we still have to respect and acknowledge that, not discredit it. But we also and must understand that through all of that, we are divine expressions of God. We are divine expressions, individualized expressions of the universe, divine intelligence. That is the core of who we are. This is why I love everybody, but I may not like everybody. I love everybody because everyone is an individualized expression of God, as I am. We are the same. But I may not like a person because maybe they're racist, and that's what they are strongly feeling, and that is their experience, And so, though I may love them, I may not be able to stand them, you see? And that's okay. We acknowledge it and we don't let it really hold us down. We don't let it really hinder us from living our truth. You see, we always recognize it out of safety, but we don't let them dictate our joy, our happiness, and our existence at this moment. Okay. So when you learn the importance of this connection in building community, you recognize how it is going to heal and amplify your healing when you really understand and surround yourself with the same, you know what I mean? The same people who are doing the same work or having the same life or the same experience. You see, you find and you build a spiritual community rooted in truth, empowerment, and love. You can host, you can join circles, rituals, conversations, right? That essentially reflect your soul's evolution and experience. So it's important, though, to recognize that all of this is really all about returning to your divine identity, not neglecting it and thinking that you have to put yourself on a pedestal or put yourself in a space where you are beneath somebody because of your race. You see, now, yes, you recognize that because of your race, things are going to be a little bit more challenging or interesting, but again, you don't identify with it, not to the point of it is taking away from your true spiritual essence. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to understand that you must keep evolving, because every step is you essentially awakening more to your truth. And everything, all of these things are simply just tools. They are things that are helping you, supporting you into waking up. Okay. Remember, you are God in form. You are creating through consciousness. Your physical essence, right? Your body, your color, your race is just expressions of consciousness. And that's a beautiful thing to embrace. And there is nothing that you should, in fact, feel like you have to be angry about or angry with somebody else who's angry about your race and gender and things of that nature. You make sure that your experience is one of joy, no matter what somebody wants to do to you, what somebody has done to you, what somebody has done to your ancestors. You embrace the beauty, the positivity, the joy, the power of who you are, of your experiences. Okay. And it's just as simple as that. So what I want you to do, what I ask of you, is in the comments below, if this resonates with you, leave a comment and say, I am the legacy. I am the legacy. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.